Remember back in the day when everybody and their grandmother wanted to pick this figure up? But in all honesty, if your grandmother was actually trying to pick this up and she's like a Marvel Legends collector, then that's really cool, because I've never met an action figure collecting grandmother. Well, honestly, just having a grandmother period is pretty awesome, because I don't really have grandmothers anymore. I haven't had one for quite some time. Anyways, that took an unusually dark turn. For those of you guys wondering exactly how my intros work, that's it. I just spew random nonsense into the microphone and I don't go back and edit it. I mean, I'll kind of cut it up a little bit here and there in terms of like the audio, but I don't go back and like re-edit it or think it through. It just spews out into just absolute nonsense. But it is what it is. In today's video, we're talking about this sexy bad boy, an action figure that a lot of people wanted for quite some time. And I'll give you guys a brief little recap on this particular figure. Originally, it was released as a BAF all the way back in 2015. Yes, it's almost been a decade since we received this figure, but within a year or two, this particular figure just skyrocketed in value. I remember seeing it anywhere between the lines of like $120 to almost $200, just depending on the seller and the time frame. And then if you wanted to buy the entire wave brand new, still factory sealed, you were gonna have to fork over anywhere from like $500 to $600. So it was a very, very expensive figure for the longest time, for years. And then about a couple of years ago, they decided to re-release a retro carded version. And technically, according to them, it's a brand new version, but it's the exact same figure, the exact same body mold. If I'm not mistaken, it comes with an extra head sculpt and then a different wash. And then obviously they put it, or they poured it into that beautiful retro card. I personally feel like it was a little bit too late. I mean, they should have released that particular figure, that retro carded version, only maybe like 4 to 5 years after its original release. But instead they decided to wait about like 7 years. As of the moment of this recording, it's going on almost 10 years since this figure was released, and it has been released in 2 different iterations: the original BAF and then obviously the retro carded re-release, which by the way was readily available. I remember picking up a couple of these. I believe they went for about $40 at a deluxe price point, which really isn't that bad when you start to kind of sit down and do the math. You do get an extra head sculpt, 2 extra hands, but I believe it was worth the price. But it wasn't difficult to find. It didn't sell out like a lot of people had projected it to, and it was very, very easy to find, whether it was like in person or online retailers. And yes, in case you guys were wondering, that original BAF did drop quite a bit in value originally. I think it's kind of popped up a little bit here and there, but I remember it being at one point even under $100. And I guess it just depends on the type of paint that you want for your figure, or if you're just a completionist and just want that BAF, I guess you can go out and find it. But the retro card obviously is a better option if you don't want to break the bank. Having said all of that, obviously this video was made with a very specific purpose, and that is just to acknowledge how poorly this figure has aged. And well, let's be brutally honest about this entire situation. Any figure that's even like 2 to 3 years old is completely outdated. Technology from Hasbro has been improving exponentially over the past couple of years, and so we shouldn't really be surprised by that fact. We see, for example, the newer Spider-Man body molds that now have pinless technology, double ab articulation, toe articulation, and the butterfly joints are obviously getting better. We do have that reverse butterfly joint Hulk as well, which is one of my favorite. And even those figures that don't get all out insane articulation, even those get at least the pinless technology, and not to mention some of the newer accessories that we've been receiving. So Hasbro has been doing a good job of moving forward and giving us some pretty innovative features that other OMs are not. So this particular figure, being almost 10 years old, is a prime candidate for an upgrade, and it wouldn't even have to be anything that crazy. I mean, the reverse butterfly joints from Hulk would probably be very simple to port onto this figure. I'm sure there's some re-engineering that would have to be done, and you know, some cuts that would have to be made on the back of the torso, but I think that would be a phenomenal feature to really take this figure to the next level. Not Not to mention this has single jointed elbows, single jointed knees, and the knees are incredibly gappy, especially when you want to have Rhino in any sort of running pose. It just does not look very good in your display. Now, I said this when I first received it. I absolutely loved it. Obviously, the first impression that you get from the figure is you're definitely overwhelmed by how big and massive this figure is. You definitely have an insane amount of appreciation for it. But as I said previously in the video, that gets really old really quickly. I mean, I've had this figure for maybe like 2 to 3 years, and even I have grown a little bit tired of it just because of the limited posability and the fact that technology has come such a long ways for Hasbro, and for them to not take full advantage, especially with a Marvel Legends Rhino with the Craven film right around the corner. Now, we're not 100% sure what the Rhino's role is going to be in this particular film. I mean, for all we know, that tiny little scene is probably like an after credit scene, but as collectors, we're always aware of the fact that if there is ever a comic book based character that gets featured on screen, people are definitely going to go out there and look for action figures based on those specific characters, even if they're not necessarily from the same source material. But just as long as it's that particular character, people are just going to want to fill in that little gap in their display. So as I said at the beginning of the video, it's not necessarily like the worst action figure of all time. It's just insanely outdated. As I mentioned, the single jointed knees just look horrendously ugly. The single jointed elbows are extremely limited. It would greatly benefit from some butterfly joints, and I floated the idea of getting those Hulk reverse butterfly joints ported on to this figure. Not to mention the collarbone area. For some unknown reason, Hasbro decided to have like a really accentuated collarbone area, so the figure is very limited when it comes to looking to its side. The figure is also somewhat limited when it looks down, which is somewhat of an issue, especially considering almost every single Spider-Man foe that he would run into is going to be considerably shorter than him. So the figure just desperately needs to be updated, and I am hoping that Hasbro has something cooking behind the scenes that we're not fully aware of. Only time will tell, but just the idea or the concept of getting a new Rhino action figure, it's just a very exciting thought. Now, obviously, we're talking about just a revamped version of this figure, but if they wanted to get really crazy, especially since they have been releasing a lot of Gamerverse action figures, especially with the Spider-Man video game franchise, which I believe up to this point we've maybe received like 5 different figures from the Spider-Man PlayStation franchise, so it would be really cool to get that mechanized Rhino. Like I said, I know it's kind of a pipe dream, and that's a completely different video or a completely different topic for a separate video, but it's definitely an exciting thought. Like I said, this is just kind of a rambling video about how I feel like we desperately need a new Rhino. Let me know your thoughts down below. Am I wrong? Do you guys want to see some updates to this figure, or do you guys want to see a completely new body mold? Let me know down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, for all of the support. We definitely feel it. Stay safe out there, continue enjoying the hobby, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys for tuning in.